Well, no one expected this, even as one of the biggest Nuggets fans on the platform. Not a legit Nuggets fan, but someone that thought they were capable of making a run at the championship. I thought they were the third best team in the West, but the Clippers were a team I thought they would struggle against, and game one aside, where they looked completely gassed, the Nuggets could have easily wrapped the series up in 5 or 6 games. Now, the same could be said for the Clippers, and the same could be said for a lot of playoff series, but the Nuggets were clearly the better team, played clearly the better basketball, and had the better stars, so they clearly deserved to win. The Lakers, however, present a different challenge than the Clippers, and the immediate threat with the Lakers is obviously the two-headed monster that is AD and LeBron. Contrary to what everyone has been saying, PJ and Kawhi actually played pretty well throughout the Denver series. They just happened to stink in Game 7, but what we have seen from AD and LeBron in this year's playoffs and their playoff careers so far, banking on them having bad games is unlikely to be fruitful. But despite that, the Lakers aren't perfect, and despite seemingly breezing through their first 2 playoff series, everything we have seen from the Nuggets in the playoffs so far suggests they should be LA's toughest opponent yet. Now, quickly before I get into the video, if you could drop a like, that would be much appreciated. Trying to upload close to daily throughout the playoffs, and liking the video helps out significantly, so thanks. That's kind of all I need you to do. Anyways, let's get back into it. Yes, I did pick the Houston Rockets to beat the Lakers in the second round of the playoffs, so many would accuse me of being a Lakers hater because apparently making a prediction automatically means you hate the other team, but my reasoning was they had been torched by Harden and Russ in their previous matchups, and more importantly for the next series, the Lakers role players had been suspect to say the least throughout the regular season, and in particular the bubble. But it turns out Markieff Morris, Rondo, Caruso, and Kuzma effectively doubled their production from what they were doing in the bubble previously, and Westbrook completely sold, but that's a different story for a different day. But I think people are looking at the series and getting a bit carried away. If Russell Westbrook doesn't have one of the most awful games you could imagine for a star player or whatever you want to call him in Game 2, the Rockets go up 2-0 more than likely, and Game 3 saw Rondo and Kuzma combine for 35. Now, these things happen in the playoffs, but there's every chance that this series goes to 6 or 7 if a few minor things go differently, so LA isn't unbeatable like many people are claiming. But forget about the Rockets. What are the major keys to this series for the Nuggets to cause an upset, and the major keys for the Lakers to continue on their quest to a championship, which many believe is inevitable at this point. Myself not included, I don't believe it's inevitable at all. The biggest concern I have over the Nuggets isn't LeBron James or Anthony Davis. Obviously, they're big concerns. It's fatigue. Murray and Jokic have played a lot of minutes over the course of 14 games. Gary Harris, coming off a long-term injury, played a lot of minutes and a lot of intense minutes at that against the Clippers. And coming off an injury and then playing at that kind of intensity leaves your body very sore for quite a few days. And we saw the Nuggets drop the first game against the Clippers, and they'll have an extra day's rest against the Lakers than they did last series, but they can't afford to give LA an easy Game 1 because this 3-1 stuff is amazing, but it's not sustainable. In terms of matchups, the Lakers did a pretty good job defending Harden, but he still averaged around 30 a game, and Murray needs to aim to average upwards of 25, because there's no coincidence in the games he fails to score over 20 points, the Nuggets lose. Game 7 of the Jazz series aside, if Murray is cooking, it forces teams to focus on him more and often lose sight of Jokic or not be able to guard him as heavily in the pick and pop, which happens throughout the Clippers series, and we saw him get off the chain quite often. And then in Game 7, we saw the Clippers really focus on not letting Jokic beat them, which resulted in Murray getting a lot more space in and around the rim and getting to his floater spot because of the emphasis on not letting Jokic hit multiple threes on the pick and pop. Now, one thing to note about how the Lakers guarded Harden was they chose to double team him a lot, like all the time pretty much, because Westbrook was essentially a non-factor from beyond the arc, even in 4-on-3 situations. However, if they do that to Murray, the Nuggets will take their chances with one of their bench players or starters being able to make an open 3 like they've done all throughout the playoffs and all throughout the regular season. In terms of LeBron, he's going to get his own regardless. He did it against a team with KD, Draymond, Thompson, and Iguodala. He can do it against any team, we know, but the Nuggets did a good job at defending Kawhi, and in particular sending double teams to his blind side. This is critical because teams always send doubles to stars, but the Clippers couldn't get it right against Jokic and he tore them up with his playmaking. But the Nuggets did a good job at not allowing Kawhi to see the double coming, and I expect them to try and implement the same strategy when guarding LeBron and AD. Probably AD in particular, because he can be prone to getting trapped if you are smart and decisive about doubling him. I would expect to see a combination of Nuggets players guarding LeBron. You got Grant, Craig, maybe even Millsap, and Harris wouldn't be the ideal matchup, but I'm sure he'll do his best to stay in front of Bron if the opportunity presents itself. Like, it's LeBron, all these people saying, oh, the Nuggets don't have a matchup for him. Like, no one does. Maybe Kawhi Leonard, and even still, LeBron's going to get 30 a game. I don't know what this argument is. We know what LeBron's going to do every single series. It's about the other players stepping up. One concern I do have, however, is Jokic struggled preventing players from attacking the rim at pace in the Jazz series, and to a lesser degree against the Clippers, but the cracks were still there. If there's one player in the NBA that attacks the rim at pace and with force, it's LeBron James. So the Nuggets are going to have to try their best to stop him from getting that head of steam, and Jokic is going to have to do a better job than he did guarding Donovan Mitchell at the rim if they want to prevent LeBron from scoring 40 a game. I think the Nuggets will try and throw Millsap at AD and get into his body, something that Tucker did at times in the series, or they might even throw Jeremy Grant because of his long wingspan and active feet as someone who will be much more likely to contest his mid-range shots, but might be susceptible to getting bullied closer to the basket. There's a few options they have. The reality is Anthony Davis is probably going to get his own as well. It's the same thing as it has always been for the Lakers. The role players are key in my opinion. We know what AD and LeBron are going to do. The role players proved me wrong last series, and I have to change my expectations of what they are capable of doing. But 3 to 8 on the Nuggets team is more talented than 3 to 8 on the Lakers roster, in my opinion. It's just whether the Lakers can get production from Kuzma, Rondo, Caruso that matches Morris, MPJ, and Harris, because the Nuggets clearly have more talent with their role players, but the pressure AD and LeBron command has led to several good looks for the other guys on the Lakers, and they converted against the Rockets. Hopefully for the Nuggets, they won't do so this series. I mean, it's really hard to tell because one series they looked awful, and the next they looked like a good enough supporting cast to win a championship. But what will the Lakers do about the Joker? Equally as unguardable as LeBron James, just in a different way. If the double team you send is just slightly off, he's going to pick you apart, and the addition of Gary Harris has been particularly good as he's been slashing to the rim or spotting up in the corner for Jokic, one of the most underrated returns of any player in this year's playoffs. Harris looks more like his old self than he has ever before, and if he can continue doing what he's doing on both ends of the floor, it takes more pressure off Jokic and Murray to give you 60 to 70 a game. But like I was saying, I don't think you can double team Jokic, and that poses the question, what can you do? Because the Clippers tried a few things, including putting Paul George on Murray and Kawhi Leonard on Jokic, so they did have a bit more length if they needed to switch on the pick and pop, which they obviously had to do a lot throughout the series. But ultimately, that didn't stop either of them from dominating. Frank Vogel did say that he'll be likely to return to McGee and Howard for more significant minutes this series, and you can expect both of those guys to get chances at guarding Jokic. I don't know if I have faith in either of these guys being able to handle the Jokic and Murray pick and pop / pick and roll, but it's worth a try, and they'll certainly provide the best post defense of any of the Lakers players. I'm sure AD will switch onto the Joker at points in time, but the Nuggets would be happy for Jokic to take AD out of the paint and onto the perimeter, because regardless of how good he can be switching onto the outside, he's more effective altering shots at the rim, and the Nuggets will be more than happy to see him consistently guarding Jokic at the three-point line instead of being a menace inside. Like all superstars, the Lakers will throw a number of different looks at Jokic. I wouldn't be surprised to see McGee and Howard played off the floor again, but we'll have to see. Defensively, Jokic did get exposed by Mitchell in the pick and roll in the Jazz's series because of Donovan's ability to get to that quick trigger mid-range or three-point shot, and Rudy being one of the best screeners in the league. And this has probably been the most exposed the Nuggets have looked all playoffs long. So the Lakers will try to do the same. However, the Lakers don't have a smaller guard like Mitchell capable of hitting quick pull-up twos and threes as frequently. And even if they do get some of that from LeBron, Jokic did prove better at switching onto it in the later games of the series, and he won't allow as many open looks as he did in games 1 to 4. Both these teams have ridiculously high levels of confidence. One team is Anthony Davis and LeBron James. The other team has come back from 3-1 down twice in a row and has been a top seed in the West for 2 years coming and has the second best pair in the playoffs leading the line. Unless we see a completely flat Denver team, which I hope we don't, this series should go close to the distance and won't be a walk in the park like many people are suggesting. If Murray can be a consistent scoring threat from the get-go, it'll open the game up for Jokic to start knocking down threes like he's been doing all playoffs long. And if Jokic can get it going, and it'll open the game up for Murray and the rest of Denver's offense, which needs these two to play incredibly well, which is obvious, and I have faith they will do so following 14 games of pretty fantastic offense. If the likes of Rondo, KCP, Kuzma, and Morris manage to outplay Morris, Harris, Grant, and MPJ, then I don't know what you can do, because you damn sure can't bank on LeBron and AD combining for 20 points in an elimination game. The Nuggets can definitely win this series. There is something to be said about this combination of chemistry and confidence that they have going for them. But if they are even 5% off the pace, it's going to be a wrap. Given how good Denver has been in elimination games, I could see them potentially pulling it out in 6 or 7, and the Lakers in 6 if they are to win. I'm about 60% leaning towards the Lakers because I think Denver will have an off game where they just look off the pace, whether it's fatigue or just an off shooting night. But this series isn't going to be an easy 4 or 5 games like some people are claiming, and I think it could be the best series yet. If you did enjoy the video, a like would be much appreciated. As always, I'm trying to make this kind of content very regularly, and all I ask is a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this. Nuggets videos are frequent here, Jokic videos are frequent here. I also talk about the Lakers, all of that good stuff. All right, see you, catch you next time.